Problem in the world isn't caused by the president. When that train derailed in East Palestine, it wasn't because Trump deregulated the brakes. These aren't news stories. They're storylines pumped into your bubble. 4, always be aware that once the news became a profit division of media companies, they stopped being in the news business and are now in the audience stroking business. The goal is no longer to inform opinions, it's to reinforce them. 3, if your news outlet consistently reduces everything that happens in the world to who the president of America is, get rid of it. It's just thoughtless, reflexive team politics. Trust me, no one lighting a tire fire in Haiti is thinking, I wouldn't have done this under Trump, but given the weakness of the Biden administration, why not?
Maher has gone to war with the mainstream media for blowing everything out of proportion. We live in an era where media establishments like CNN and MS Now stand accused of inflating every issue simply to grab eyeballs. Maher, who has never been a fan of that strategy, recently criticized the mainstream media for what he sees as persistent bias, especially against Trump and the GOP. Maher's critique was scorching and unapologetically brutal. So hit the subscribe button and let's dive into it.
Reported this year that the U.S. was on track for nearly a 300% increase in measles cases. 300%? Wow, that sounds like it could be millions. It was 35. Because they just want to manipulate you into clicking. Look, I have 10 fingers. You want to see me suddenly have 80% less? Let's go, please. Okay. 5, never trust the initial reports. The media cares way more about being first than being right. They love a scoop, but it's a scoop of shit.
You've been following the mainstream media for a while, especially since last year. You'll probably understand exactly what Bill Maher is talking about. There seems to be a pattern, one that looks less like honest reporting and more like deliberate exaggeration. Stories involving Donald Trump or the Republican Party often get amplified, dramatized, and rushed out before all the facts are even on the table. The moment a negative headline about the president surfaces, it spreads across networks and social media at lightning speed. Nuance disappears, context gets buried, and the race to be first replaces the responsibility to be accurate. Maher's argument is that this constant rush to push sensational narratives doesn't just damage the credibility of the media, it also fuels public distrust. When audiences feel like stories are exaggerated or selectively framed, they stop believing the coverage altogether. In trying so hard to expose Trump, the media may actually be undermining its own authority.
You have to care about the truth. The media doesn't care about it because they know you don't care, that you just want to hear your side. So at some point you need to take a step back, look around, and be really honest. Are you actually as fucked as your news feed tells you are? Are you miserable? Some people are, and we should help them. Are you destitute? Some people are, and we should help them. But most people who take the subway get to work alive. Most don't fall out of a plane with a missing door.
Maher's point hits a nerve because it reflects a broader problem with how modern media works. News feeds often deliver half-baked stories, not necessarily because journalists lack information, but because audiences are conditioned to consume quick, emotionally satisfying narratives. Many viewers on the left aren't always tuning in to challenge their views or hear uncomfortable facts. Instead, they're looking for coverage that reinforces what they already believe about politics, Trump, and the Republican Party. That demand creates a powerful incentive for networks to shape stories in ways that echo the sentiments of their core audience. The result is a feedback loop. The audience expects a certain narrative, the media delivers it, and both sides become more entrenched in the process. It's precisely why these outlets continue to attract large, loyal audiences. People return not just for information, but for validation. In that environment, nuance fades, skepticism disappears, and commentary often replaces careful, balanced reporting altogether.
Could absolutely blow up the world on day 1 of term 2. He's a dangerous, erratic, insane, awful person, and I'd love to help him get not elected. But he didn't actually start World War III last time, or nuke a hurricane, or trade Puerto Rico for Greenland. Sure. Sure, the sequel is usually worse, but until he does, I'm going to live my life and not the one the media wants me to live, hating half the country and shitting my pants 24/7. Is the sky really falling? I don't know. Maybe. And maybe it's just the door from a Boeing airplane.
The left are genuinely alarmed by the fact that Trump is back in power, and some fear his leadership could push the world toward a major global conflict. That anxiety has been amplified by constant warnings in certain media circles, where every foreign policy move is framed as a potential step toward World War III. But what critics like Bill Maher are arguing is that this view ignores a key aspect of Trump's political style: his pragmatism. Trump has often approached international issues less as an ideologue and more as a negotiator who believes in leverage, pressure, and deals. Pragmatists by nature tend to focus on outcomes rather than dramatic escalation. Maher's point is that fear-driven narratives don't always reflect reality. Instead of staying locked inside media bubbles that constantly reinforce worst-case scenarios, he's urging people on the left to widen their perspective, listen to opposing viewpoints, examine different interpretations, and step outside the echo chamber shaping their
It's time for the media to admit that they blew the whole thing way out of proportion, because as always with media these days, they don't cover what's most important, just what's most fun to watch. There are 15.2 million college students in the U.S., and 2,300 have been arrested. That's 1/67th of 1%, and half of the ones in New York weren't even students. But we were given the false impression that these protesters are the voice of their generation, having found a cause for which they were willing to go to the tents and to the barricades. Oh, please, these kids are more violent when their team wins a championship.
Maher points to a recent example that perfectly illustrates how the media can inflate a small event into a national spectacle. A handful of students staged a demonstration on a college campus, something that happens fairly often in American universities. Yet within hours, several media outlets framed the protest as if it represented a massive nationwide student uprising. Headlines and commentary made it sound like campuses across the country were erupting in outrage, when in reality it was a relatively small group making noise. According to Maher, this kind of exaggeration isn't accidental. It serves a narrative. By amplifying minor incidents and presenting them as sweeping national reactions, the media can create the impression of widespread opposition. And more often than not, the target of that narrative is the same person, the president. Maher argues that this tendency to magnify every small protest or controversy ultimately distorts reality and fuels unnecessary panic among audiences.
A Harvard youth poll proved it. They asked people 18 to 29 what issues mattered most to them, and out of 16 choices, Palestine came in 15. The vast majority just want to do what they went to college for in the first place, to experiment with being a lesbian. But when these kids chant, the whole world is watching, they're right. But only because you assholes with the cameras won't show anything else. Isn't there a bear in a swimming pool somewhere you should be?
Nope. They wouldn't cover that story because it simply wouldn't bring the eyeballs or the attention they're chasing. In today's media environment, calm reporting doesn't sell nearly as well as outrage. Networks know that the faster way to keep viewers glued to their screens is by serving up stories that spark anger, fear, or indignation. For many of these outlets, rage has essentially become a business model. The more emotional the reaction, the higher the engagement and the higher the ratings. So instead of highlighting ordinary events or balanced perspectives, the focus shifts toward narratives that can inflame passions and trigger strong reactions. Panels get louder, headlines get sharper, and every disagreement is framed like a national crisis. It's not just about informing the public anymore. It's about capturing attention in an increasingly competitive media market. And in that race for attention, outrage often proves far more profitable than calm, measured journalism.
I thought as a public service, since it's so hard to find reliable news these days, tonight I would provide a few rules of thumb for trying to follow the news in our modern age. Starting with, if the headlines in your preferred news outlet routinely feature words like shreds, destroys, pummels, bashes, your outlet is a partisan piece of shit. Either that or you're reading a Batman comic. Ditto with obliterates, roasts, annihilates, and owns. You're supposed to be a source for information, not Nikki Glaser at the Tom Brady roast.
When someone truly dismantles a woke policy or challenges a left-leaning philosophy with solid arguments, then framing the headline to reflect that moment makes sense. Strong language isn't automatically dishonest if it accurately captures what actually happened. The problem begins when the headline promises fireworks that the content simply doesn't deliver. That's the distinction Maher is trying to highlight. His criticism isn't that media outlets should never use bold or dramatic wording. It's that those words must match reality. If the substance of the discussion genuinely exposes flaws in an argument or policy, then a headline reflecting that clash is fair game. But when headlines exaggerate, distort, or oversell the story just to lure readers in, credibility takes a hit. Audiences feel manipulated, and trust in the outlet erodes. Maher's broader point is simple. Dramatic framing should follow the facts, not replace them. Otherwise, journalism starts drifting into pure performance.
2. Any news source that quotes the internet or writes Twitter says or a bunch of hacks too lazy to do real journalism. You can pretend you wrote a piece on the zeitgeist, but what you really did was look on your phone and quote the 3 angriest people with the most time on their hands.
Now, this part is actually pretty funny because most people already know exactly which media outlets Maher is hinting at. Instead of doing the hard work that real journalism requires, digging into sources, verifying facts, and providing proper context, some of these outlets seem to take the easy route. Critics argue that some outlets rely heavily on social media reactions and present those comments as if they reflect broader public opinion. 3 tweets suddenly become what fans are saying, and a handful of online reactions magically turns into a national trend. It's a shortcut that replaces investigation with confirmation bias. Critics argue that this habit is particularly common in certain left-leaning media spaces, where social media sentiment often gets treated as evidence. The result is reporting that feels less like journalism and more like a curated echo chamber designed to reinforce the audience's existence.
If your news outlet consistently reduces everything that happens in the world to who the president of America is, get rid of it. It's just thoughtless, reflexive teen politics. Trust me, no one lighting a tire fire in Haiti is thinking, I wouldn't have done this under Trump, but given the weakness of the Biden administration, why not?
Is really tearing into left-leaning media outlets because, in his view, they have a habit of reducing almost everything that happens in America, and sometimes even around the world, to Donald Trump. Economic shifts, social debates, international conflicts. Somehow the conversation always circles back to him. Maher's argument is that this obsession has reached the point where Trump becomes the explanation for nearly every headline, whether the connection is strong or not. Yes, Trump is the president of the most powerful country in the world, and his actions naturally carry global consequences, but that doesn't automatically make him responsible for every political controversy, cultural clash, or policy failure that pops up in the news cycle. By constantly forcing every story through the Trump lens, the media risks oversimplifying complex issues. Maher suggests that this approach doesn't just distort reality, it also keeps the public trapped in a never-ending cycle of outrage, rather than encouraging deep
problem in the world isn't caused by the president. When that train derailed in East Palestine, it wasn't because Trump deregulated the brakes and the container ship didn't hit the bridge because of Biden's woke DEI agenda. These aren't news stories. They're storylines pumped into your bubble. 4, always be aware that once the news became a profit division of media companies, they stopped being in the news business and are now in the audience stroking business. The goal is no longer to inform opinions, it's to reinforce them. Walter Cronkite used to say, that's the way it is. Now it's, that's our story and we're staying.
Maher's message is less about defending Trump and more about challenging the way modern media operates. When every story is exaggerated, every protest becomes a national uprising, and every political development is tied back to one man. The public eventually begins to question the credibility of the coverage. Sensationalism may drive ratings, but it also erodes trust. Maher's critique is a reminder that journalism works best when it prioritizes accuracy over outrage and context over narrative. Viewers, too, have a role to play. Instead of staying locked inside media bubbles that constantly reinforce their beliefs, people should seek out different perspectives and examine issues more critically. A healthier media environment depends on both responsible reporting and audiences willing to think beyond the headlines. And this brings us to the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, then hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.